Trump is no stranger to criticism. Over the years, comedians, late-night hosts, celebrities, and political commentators have all taken shots at him. But every once in a while, a moment comes along that seems to hit differently. And according to many observers, that is exactly what happened after Chris Rock delivered a blistering series of jokes that immediately exploded across television, social media, and the news cycle. What started as a comedy segment quickly turned into one of the most talked-about moments of the week. The audience erupted with laughter. Clips spread across the internet at lightning speed. Commentators began dissecting every line. And before long, attention shifted away from Chris Rock's jokes and on to Donald Trump's reaction. Because if there's one thing we've learned over the years, it's that Trump rarely lets public criticism slide. Whether it comes from political rivals, journalists, celebrities, or comedians, he often feels compelled to respond. Sometimes it's a statement. Sometimes it's a social media post. Sometimes it's an entire media blitz. But this time, many people believe the response revealed just how deeply the jokes got under his skin. The controversy began during a nationally televised appearance where Chris Rock launched into a routine that mixed politics, celebrity culture, and current events. While the comedian covered a range of topics, it was his comments about Trump that generated the loudest reaction from the crowd. The room exploded with laughter as Rock delivered punchline after punchline, seemingly knowing exactly which buttons to push. Within minutes, clips of the performance were circulating online. Supporters of Rock praised the comedian for saying what many people were thinking. Critics accused him of crossing the line. Political commentators immediately began debating whether comedy had become one of the most effective forms of political criticism in modern America. But then came the reaction that truly turned the moment into a major story. According to reports and social media users tracking the situation, Trump appeared visibly frustrated by the attention the comedy segment was receiving. Allies rushed to defend him. Supporters attempted to push back against the narrative. Meanwhile, critics argued that the former president's response only amplified the original jokes and guaranteed that millions more people would see them. And that's where things became fascinating. Instead of allowing the news cycle to move on, every reaction seemed to breathe new life into the story. Television panels discussed it. Podcasts analyzed it. Social media influencers weighed in. Even people who hadn't originally seen Chris Rock's performance suddenly wanted to know what all the fuss was about. The result was a perfect storm. A celebrity comedian at the center of a viral moment, a polarizing political figure responding to criticism, and an internet ecosystem designed to magnify every controversy into a national conversation. What makes this story particularly interesting isn't just the comedy itself. It's the larger question it raises about power, public image, and the role of entertainers in political discourse. For decades, comedians have used humor to challenge presidents, politicians, and public figures. From Johnny Carson to George Carlin to Jon Stewart, comedy has often served as a unique form of commentary that reaches audiences traditional political analysis cannot. Chris Rock understands this dynamic better than most. Throughout his career, he has built a reputation for tackling controversial subjects with a mixture of humor, satire, and sharp social observation. Whether audiences agree with him or not, his ability to spark conversation is undeniable. And in this case, the conversation grew far bigger than anyone expected. As reactions poured in from every corner of the political spectrum, one thing became clear: this wasn't just another celebrity joke. It had evolved into a broader cultural moment. Supporters and critics alike were debating not only what Chris Rock said, but also how Trump responded and what that response revealed. Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what happened, why the moment went viral, how social media reacted, and why this story has become one of the most talked-about political entertainment clashes in recent memory. From the original jokes to the fallout that followed, we'll examine every angle of the controversy and explore why a few minutes of comedy managed to dominate headlines across the country. Because sometimes the biggest political stories don't start in Washington. Sometimes they start with a microphone, a spotlight, and a comedian who isn't afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. As the clips continued spreading across social media, the story took on a life of its own. What had started as a few minutes of comedy suddenly became the center of a much larger debate about politics, celebrity influence, and public image. Millions of people who had never watched the original broadcast were now seeing edited clips, reaction videos, and commentary breakdowns discussing every joke, every audience reaction, and every response that followed. The internet, as it often does, transformed a single entertainment moment into a full-scale cultural event. Supporters of Chris Rock argued that comedians have always challenged powerful figures and that no public official should be immune from satire. Others claimed the jokes were unfair, overly personal, or designed simply to generate controversy. Regardless of where people stood, the one thing almost everyone agreed on was that the performance had captured attention in a way few television moments do anymore. In an era of fragmented media consumption, it is increasingly rare for one event to dominate conversations across multiple platforms at the same time. Yet that is exactly what happened here. The more people talked about it, the bigger the story became. Political commentators began weighing in on cable news programs. Podcast hosts devoted entire episodes to analyzing the fallout. Social media users dissected individual punchlines frame by frame. Even people who generally avoid political content found themselves pulled into the discussion because the controversy had become impossible to ignore. The situation became even more intense when various public figures started choosing sides. Some defended Rock's right to joke about public figures. Others argued that comedians should focus on entertainment rather than politics. The debate quickly expanded beyond the original performance and into larger questions about free speech, celebrity influence, and the changing role of comedy in modern culture. For decades, comedians have served as unofficial commentators on current events. They have mocked presidents, criticized institutions, and challenged cultural norms. From late-night television to stand-up specials, comedy has often functioned as a mirror reflecting society's tensions and contradictions. Chris Rock has built much of his career around that tradition. Known for his sharp observations and willingness to tackle controversial subjects, he has never been a performer who avoids difficult conversations. His style has always involved blending humor with social commentary, often provoking strong reactions from audiences across the political spectrum. That reputation is one reason this particular moment attracted so much attention. Viewers expected him to be provocative. What surprised many observers was the scale of the reaction afterward. The story quickly shifted from what Rock had said to how others responded. Analysts began discussing whether attempts to push back against the jokes were actually helping them reach a larger audience. Media experts pointed out that controversial responses often extend the lifespan of a story rather than ending it. In many cases, criticism can generate additional curiosity, leading more people to seek out the original content. That dynamic appeared to be unfolding in real time. Every new statement, reaction, or social media post seemed to create another wave of interest. The cycle repeated itself day after day. First came the performance, then came the reactions, then came the reactions to the reactions. Before long, the story had evolved into something much bigger than a comedy segment. It had become a symbol of broader political and cultural divisions. Supporters on each side interpreted the event through entirely different lenses. One group viewed it as an example of comedy speaking truth to power. Another saw it as evidence of perceived media bias. The same jokes produced completely different conclusions depending on who was watching. This phenomenon highlights a larger trend in contemporary media. Increasingly, public events are not experienced collectively, but rather filtered through partisan perspectives. Two people can watch the exact same clip and come away with opposite interpretations. Social media algorithms often reinforce these divisions by showing users content that aligns with their existing views. As a result, controversies frequently become less about the original event and more about the narrative surrounding it. The Chris Rock moment fit perfectly into that pattern. Different outlets emphasized different aspects of the story. Some focused on the comedy itself. Others concentrated on the political implications. Still others examined the broader media reaction. Each version of the story attracted a different audience, further expanding its reach. Meanwhile, entertainment reporters began documenting how rapidly the clips were spreading online. Metrics showed massive engagement numbers across multiple platforms. Videos accumulated millions of views. Hashtags trended for days. Comment sections filled with arguments, jokes, memes, and debates. The controversy had effectively become self-sustaining. At that point, it no longer required traditional media coverage to remain relevant. The audience itself was keeping the story alive. Every share, comment, repost, and reaction contributed to its continued visibility. This illustrates one of the defining characteristics of modern media ecosystems. In previous decades, news organizations largely controlled which stories remained in public consciousness. Today, audiences play a much larger role. Viral content can persist for weeks simply because users continue discussing it. The line between entertainment and news becomes increasingly blurred. A comedy segment can generate political analysis. A political response can become entertainment. The boundaries that once separated these categories have become far less distinct. As the controversy continued unfolding, observers began comparing it to previous clashes between comedians and political figures. History offers numerous examples of satire provoking strong reactions from those in power. Political cartoons, late-night monologues, stand-up routines, and television sketches have long served as vehicles for criticism. What makes modern controversies different is the speed at which they spread. Social media ensures that moments which might once have faded after a single news cycle can now reach global audiences within hours. A joke delivered to one audience can be viewed by millions before the day ends. Reactions arrive instantly. Debates emerge immediately. Narratives form and evolve in real time. This accelerated environment amplifies both the impact and the consequences of public statements. It also creates incentives for increasingly dramatic responses. Participants know that controversy attracts attention. Attention generates engagement. Engagement drives visibility. Visibility creates influence. The result is a system where conflict often becomes the most effective way to remain relevant. Some analysts argued that this dynamic played a significant role in the story's longevity. Rather than fading naturally, the controversy kept generating new angles, new reactions, and new talking points. Each development provided fresh material for commentators, journalists, and content creators. The story became a feedback loop feeding on its own momentum. At the same time, many viewers simply enjoyed the spectacle. Political disagreements aside, there is an undeniable entertainment value in watching high-profile public figures become involved in highly public disputes. Audiences are naturally drawn to conflict, especially when recognizable personalities are involved. This tendency is hardly new. Throughout history, public rivalries have attracted attention. What has changed is the scale. Digital platforms allow millions of people to observe, comment on, and participate in these disputes simultaneously. Every viewer becomes a potential contributor to the conversation. Every opinion becomes part of the larger narrative. This collective participation transforms controversies into interactive events. People are not merely consuming the story, they are helping shape it. In the weeks that followed, commentators continued debating what the incident revealed about contemporary politics and media culture. Some argued it demonstrated the enduring power of comedy as a form of political commentary. Others believed it showed how entertainment increasingly dominates public discourse. Still, others focused on the role of social media in amplifying conflicts that might otherwise remain relatively minor. Regardless of interpretation, few disputed the event's significance. It had captured public attention, generated extensive discussion, and become a reference point in broader conversations about politics, celebrity culture, and communication. Looking back, what makes the episode particularly noteworthy is not any single joke or reaction, but rather the chain reaction that followed. One performance led to widespread discussion. That discussion generated additional coverage. The coverage produced further reactions. Those reactions created new debates. The cycle continued expanding until the story became far larger than its original source material. This pattern has become increasingly common in the digital age. A single moment can trigger an avalanche of content, commentary, and controversy. Understanding that process is essential for understanding modern media itself. Events no longer exist in isolation. They become nodes within vast networks of interpretation and amplification. Every statement generates responses. Every response generates counter-responses. The resulting conversation can persist long after the original event has ended. In many ways, the Chris Rock controversy serves as a case study in how contemporary media ecosystems function. It demonstrates the interconnected nature of entertainment, politics, journalism, and social media. It shows how narratives evolve through repeated interpretation. It illustrates the power of viral content to shape public conversations. Most importantly, it highlights the reality that attention has become one of the most valuable commodities in modern society. Those who capture attention influence the conversation. Those who influence the conversation shape perceptions. And those perceptions often matter as much as the underlying facts themselves. Whether viewed as comedy, politics, entertainment, or cultural commentary, the incident succeeded in doing what few media moments achieve. It made people pay attention for days, perhaps weeks. Millions of individuals found themselves discussing the same topic, analyzing the same clips, and debating the same questions. In a fragmented information environment, that level of collective focus is increasingly rare. It is also one reason the story continues attracting interest long after the initial headlines appeared. The controversy tapped into larger issues extending far beyond one comedian or one political figure. It touched on questions of power, influence, media responsibility, public perception, and the evolving relationship between entertainment and politics. Those themes ensure that discussions surrounding the event will likely continue well into the future, serving as yet another example of how a few moments on television can spark conversations that reach far beyond the studio where they began. As the conversation continued evolving, another interesting development began to emerge. The story was no longer just about a comedian delivering jokes or a public figure responding to criticism. It had become a reflection of how modern audiences consume information and form opinions. People who had never watched a full Chris Rock performance suddenly found themselves discussing his material. Others who rarely paid attention to political commentary were now debating media coverage, public reactions, and the broader implications of celebrity influence. This is one of the defining characteristics of the digital era. Stories rarely remain confined to their original context. A comedy routine becomes a political discussion. A political reaction becomes entertainment content. An entertainment controversy becomes a national conversation. The boundaries between these categories continue to blur, creating an environment where virtually any public moment can evolve into something much larger than intended. As more commentators weighed in, attention shifted toward the broader cultural significance of the event. Some observers argued that the situation highlighted the growing influence of entertainers in shaping public discourse. Unlike traditional political analysts, comedians often communicate through humor, making complex topics more accessible to wider audiences. A joke can sometimes reach people who would never sit through a policy debate or a lengthy political speech. That accessibility gives comedians a unique position in modern media. They are entertainers first, but they often become commentators by default because audiences interpret their observations as reflections of larger social realities. Chris Rock has occupied that space for much of his career. His comedy frequently addresses issues that extend beyond simple punchlines, touching on culture, public behavior, media narratives, and social tensions. Whether audiences agree with his conclusions or not, his ability to spark conversation has remained one of his defining traits. In this particular case, the reactions seemed to confirm that influence. The jokes themselves became less important than the discussions they generated. Entire panels of experts debated the meaning behind audience reactions. Social media users analyze body language, tone, timing, and context. News organizations produced articles examining why the clips resonated so strongly. The original performance served as a catalyst for a much broader examination of contemporary politics and media culture. Another factor contributing to the story's longevity was the sheer speed of online communication. In previous generations, public controversies often unfolded over days or weeks. Today, reactions appear within seconds, clips circulate instantly, opinions form rapidly. Narratives emerge before all the facts are even available. This acceleration creates an environment where stories can grow exponentially in a very short period of time. The Chris Rock controversy demonstrated exactly how quickly that process can occur. What began as a single televised moment transformed into a nationwide discussion almost overnight. Millions of people encountered different versions of the story depending on where they received their information. Some saw short clips emphasizing the biggest laughs. Others watched commentary videos analyzing the political implications. Still others encountered articles focusing on the media response. Each version presented a slightly different narrative, contributing to a fragmented yet interconnected public conversation. This fragmentation helps explain why people often reach dramatically different conclusions about the same event. Information is no longer consumed through a handful of shared sources. Instead, audiences navigate countless platforms, creators, and communities, each offering its own interpretation. As a result, public controversies frequently become battlegrounds for competing narratives rather than straightforward discussions about facts. The Chris Rock episode fit perfectly into this pattern. Different groups viewed the same incident through entirely different lenses, reinforcing existing beliefs while creating new debates. Yet despite these divisions, the story also revealed something that remains remarkably consistent across political and cultural lines. People are fascinated by authenticity. Audiences respond strongly when they believe they are witnessing unscripted reactions or genuine emotions. Whether supporters or critics agreed with the individuals involved, many viewers felt the controversy provided a glimpse behind carefully managed public images. That perception of authenticity helped sustain interest long after the initial headlines faded. In an age of polished messaging and strategic communication, moments that appear spontaneous often attract disproportionate attention. Viewers want to see how public figures respond under pressure. They want to observe reactions that seem unscripted, emotional, or revealing. Those moments create narratives that feel more personal and relatable than traditional political messaging. The widespread interest surrounding this controversy suggests that audiences remain deeply invested in understanding not only what public figures say, but also how they react when challenged. Ultimately, the lasting significance of the story may have less to do with any individual joke and more to do with what the reaction revealed about contemporary media culture. It demonstrated how quickly attention can shift, how powerfully social media can amplify events, and how entertainment increasingly intersects with politics in ways that influence national conversation. Most importantly, it showed that in today's information environment, a few minutes of television can spark discussions that extend far beyond the original broadcast, drawing in millions of participants and generating debates that continue long after the cameras stop rolling.